is Michelle. I'm a grateful believer in Jesus Christ who celebrates recovery from chemical addiction and sexual abuse. Today I struggle with codependency and food addiction.
Hi, Michelle.
Hi, forever family.
Love you.
As a young child, I grew up in a seemingly loving home. My mom was super involved, teaching me everything she could before kindergarten. My father was a loving after-work dad, laughter, barbecue, wrestling, and swinging in the air. I can recall tones in our house, though. There's Dad's late tone, Dad's drinking, and the worst, Mom's mad at Dad tone. Dad never had tones with us kids, just Mom. One night, I heard my dad's scariest tone ever. My mom told him she wanted a divorce. She blamed him for being an alcoholic and had began cheating. At age 6, by my sister of 3 and my 6-month baby brother, I watched my dad slit his throat. A new instinct overtook, and I swooped to my siblings' side, rushing them in close for safety, and then watched as my daddy fled to the bathroom in hopes of dying, locking himself in and refusing help. The rest of that night is a blur. My mom quickly divorced my father. He did not show up to court. Mom had sole custody. Dad had disappeared. I felt abandoned, and I began feeling failure for the first time. Mom immediately married my stepdad. He didn't waste much time making me feel special. At age 7, I was introduced to sexual activities, including pornography. It was not until about age 10 that I began to realize that sort of special was not totally normal compared to my friends and how their dads acted. My baby sister was born, and I lost some of his attention. This is when I majorly began shoplifting, and scary movies became an obsession. The pleasure of porn, the rush of theft, adrenaline from horror films, and keeping secrets followed me through into adulthood. This way of life, stealing, and being the sex object my stepdad wanted, developing great depths of secrets and deception became normal. I believed one day we would be together like his letters said, until my dad showed up after a long 4 years. We got Dad to ourselves in his tiny apartment, cooking on top of a kerosene heater, using a cooler for a fridge, and eating pizza every Friday night at the Blue Room. This was bliss to me. Dad moved and got a great new job, so I went to his house every other weekend and for the summer. Immediately, I learned that my dad also didn't act like my stepdad. For 2 years, my stepdad backed off some, only stealing very careful moments with me. Those summers at my dad's are my best childhood memories. Chasing the ice cream truck, Bigfoot pizza, roller skating, trash can swimming pools, concrete curb water slides, lots of barbecue and love. Until about age 12, when he was in a bad wreck, rendering him disabled. I discovered his long hours in his bedroom were because he was an IV drug user. I recall a traffic stop that Dad told me, "Hide this." It was a syringe, and down in my pants it went. This was my first physical exposure to anything drug-related. I'd do anything to keep him from going to jail. After getting real scared and being locked out of his bedroom repeatedly, I told him us kids are drugs. He made the choice once again, and addiction and his pain over us kids. So we got picked up, and I didn't see him for years. I was back to every weekend and all summer at home. It wasn't all bad. My mom was a hard worker, often keeping 2 jobs. I watched her sacrifice sleep, health, and happiness to make sure us kids had what we needed and what my stepdad wanted. I thought the inappropriate sexual behaviors were well hidden and balanced since I was fooling everyone. Then, at age 13, my step-cousins learned what my stepdad had, and they began to pursue me. After realizing that he had promoted this behavior, I felt I wasn't that special to him, and more than ever, I longed to escape. This lifestyle had only one positive. I fell in love with books. I dove into every one, escaping reality through stories. No one could take knowledge from me, ever. My education level was exemplary. I was 1 out of 5 kids at school to be tested and start the First Gifted program, where I remained through to high school. I excelled at academics to keep me from home as much as possible. My mom moved us to Pacific and in with my aunt so she could get back on her feet and buy a home. This is when I was forced into a sexual relationship with my cousin. Yes, incest was the family secret. I dressed to make a sexual appeal, acting out a lot, but I now know nothing I endured as a child was my fault, nor could I ever do enough bad to deserve what happened to me. After much shame placed on me, even though my cousin was well over age 18, I was slapped, cursed, humiliated, and called a whore. After that, my stepdad was inaccessible for a while, and I had a moment where me, the victim, began to victimize. After 3 times, guilt set in, and I stopped. I had known it wasn't normal. Now I fully realized it was wrong. We quickly moved and I started high school. I began to notice boys my age and my attention strongly redirected. We moved back to my hometown and I found my high school sweetheart. One day, my best friend intercepted a love letter from my stepdad. All the pieces came together and she took me to the cops. My stepdad was immediately removed from the home, but not for long. I came home a few nights later and saw his truck pulled way up by the fence line. The door was locked, so I had to knock. My mom came to the door and said, "I'm busy." I cried, "He's not supposed to be here." She firmly said, "Well, he is back." That moment severed our relationship for many years. I felt she forced my hand to leave. My boyfriend and I moved in with his cousin and his wife and waited for court. By the time it came, my proof, the box of letters the police took, had disappeared. With all the evidence gone, I gave up, so that was it. At the time, I didn't consciously care. I was safe and out with my new family, my friends. I didn't want to hurt my baby sister, so I dropped it forever. At this time, I was drug-free and an honor roll student. Quickly, my morals smeared. Pot wasn't so bad, right? Then my boyfriend and his cousin pleaded with me to try meth. I allowed my boyfriend to use, but I had no personal interest, until I did. After a huge scare, thinking that he was dying, I was sold out and done with drugs again. I got a job at night, we got our own apartment, but quickly had a house full of misfits like me, neglected, abused, misplaced teenagers. Sadly, most of them were already active drug users. I continued to work, and because of this, I dropped out of high school my junior year. I had managed to maintain wonderful grades, but had poor attendance. My dad popped back in at this time, and I began regularly smoking pot, relapse number 1. I eventually decided to try meth again, mainly to fit in, but also to stay awake at night shift, relapse number 2. One day we were out, and I thought my boyfriend had overdosed. Luckily, I knew where a friend he worked with lived. It was close by, so he helped me get my boyfriend home. I was surely done with meth now. After a few months into our living together, I connected with that same friend of his, seeing him often since they worked together. I was magnetized to him. He became my first true love. Travis. I was addicted to him instantly. I left my apartment and all my things to be with him. 1 month later, I found him and my dad shooting up in the bathroom. Instead of being disgusted, I was jealous. I wanted to feel what he was feeling in the exact way that he felt it. I was jealous of the fact that the high satisfied him better than me. After 3 weeks of secretly pondering it with my best friend, we finally asked to try. I was officially addicted to meth. Relapse number 3. January of 2000, I had just turned 17 and became a daily IV drug user. September 2000, our house got raided for what later comes out to be 7 felony drug convictions. March of 01, Travis went to jail, and I found out I was pregnant. In desperation, I called my mom after the long period of having no relationship. I thought my life was over and that I had no one. Wrong. She rushed over. After coming clean to her about my lifestyle, we went to the emergency room, and after a lot of tests, they confirmed I was exactly 6 months pregnant. I was instantly sober. The doctor said my baby was fine and healthy. He stated it was impossible to have been using every day for the past 6 months. That's another testimony in itself. The sum of that is, it's the first time that I saw, felt, or knew God. He saved my baby, so it saved me. Travis got out, and we started lives as sober, soon-to-be parents. After 3 weeks, I began to notice behaviors, old familiar ones. I discovered he was using again. Sadly, Travis was high during the rest of the pregnancy and the delivery of our daughter. Upon returning home with our new baby, we found our house had been robbed. I was exhausted, angry, tired of being sober. My dad came around the next day to meet his new granddaughter. I begged to use again. Relapse number 4. I used for 1 week. I had no tolerance built up and came closest in my life ever to overdose. Lying on the cold, wet ground, telling myself, "Breathe, Michelle. Trislan's inside. Just breathe." Finally, the guilt consumed me, and I swore it off for good. I was sober again. September 2001, the trouble caught up to us. We were both finally arrested on the drug charges from a year ago and went to jail. I pled guilty to all the charges and was quickly sentenced. January 2002, I went to serve my 40 days in jail and began my 7-year probation. I missed my daughter's first steps in that 40 days, and when I got out, I had to immediately say goodbye to Travis as he quickly went off to serve his time. Since we were unmarried felons, I couldn't visit him at all. I began to work on myself, getting a job, attending church, and build a relationship with my mom, who was a godsend for this first-time mama. When Travis got out, we got a little home, and he asked me to marry him. I accepted, and life was good for a while. He struggled with drugs on and off. After a late-night overdose scare, everyone insisted that he go to church. He refused, and later that week, I woke up to him missing. He wrecked into a tree and fled the scene. After beating the should-be probation violation, he finally took our church invitation, and that Sunday he was saved. The next 2 weeks were pure joy as engaged, sober parents. I came home one night, and our 2.5-year-old daughter was asleep on his lap on the mower. I noticed he was familiarly chatty and picked a routine fight as soon as he hit the door. So I asked him, "What are you on this time?" He told me, "Oxy," and I became enraged. Goodbye, fairy tale. He asked me to go get him some smokes. Grudgingly, I did. Upon return, I found him passed out against our coffee table. I threw his cigarettes at him and began the hunt for his stash and paraphernalia. No luck. So angrily, I put a pillow down on the living room floor, laid him over on it, covered him up, put a fan on him, and huffily headed to bed. Sometime early morning, I heard coughing come across the baby monitor. He probably needed a drink or maybe his inhaler. Either way, I thought he could get it himself. So I turned the monitor off and went back to sleep. I woke up to find the darn turtle was out of its box and began yelling at Travis to get up and find it. I began my routine of coffee and making his lunch. Still, he didn't get up. I walked into the living room and turned on the light. After nudging his foot, his head rolled to the side, and I could see that he was purple and there was liquid coming out of his mouth. I don't remember much except thinking I saw him breathe. Hysterically, I called his mom. I always tried to protect him, so I was trying to avoid the cops. She screamed, "Call 911." As the sirens drew near and hysteria set in, I became numb. The EMTs confirmed that he had been dead for several hours. It was September 19th, 2003. I was 21, and after 5 years of ups and downs, I lost my fiance 1 month before our wedding. I couldn't stand to look at my own daughter. The funeral came and went by in a tearful blur. For sure now, one thing in my life was certain. I was going insane. After facing repeated meltdowns, I isolated for days, not showering or eating or touching my child. I sought out a doctor for some help, some medication. I couldn't stand myself. Before starting new meds, a urinalysis had to be done. The doctor came in and said, "I can't prescribe because you're pregnant." Very bittersweet news that none of us could believe. When it finally set in, I was horrified. Why, God? I was already angry with him, and now God had me furious. After a few hours of thinking, why would God leave me with another child, another painful memory, I snapped out of it, and then I began thanking God for another child, another memory. The second pregnancy God used to save me from myself, so 9 months later came our second daughter. In 2005, I started my first relationship after Travis died. I was ready for happiness and a family that was whole. He quickly asked me to marry him, and I said yes. It didn't take long, and I was pregnant. At 28 weeks, I spent a long night awake and in pain from falling down our stairs. My fiance met me and Jeff at the hospital. The doctor confirmed the baby and I were okay. I had simply stressed my body and mind out into exhaustion and was ready for bed rest. We argued, then decided I would drive myself home because we needed the money, so he went back to work. I left the hospital and 25 minutes later woke up spitting blood and glass. I had fallen asleep and ran off the road, crashing the car into a tree. I had noticeable injuries but refused x-rays because of my baby. I was stabilized and admitted. Later that night, the nurse then came and took both mine and my fiance's hands as the doctor bluntly said, "We have lost fetal heart tones." I was later that day induced and delivered our daughter, stillborn at 28 weeks. Grief-stricken again, I wanted to die. God was my enemy, I thought. Upon delivery, I saw major bruising on her head, and the blame game immediately set in the room, dividing family against family. During the autopsy, it was discovered that she had a ventricular hemorrhage in her brain, a bleed that was caused by the impact of my seatbelt buckle against her tiny head. We returned home. Me on crutches from a fractured pelvis. Our future was over. Our lives felt over. Her death destroyed us. I began to sneak, lie, cheat, and drink. Relapse number 5. He wanted to fix me and get pregnant again, but I refused. Looking for trouble and pain, I came to learn that this guy I sort of knew had just gotten out of prison. He was a known bad boy, just what I needed. He came with his own story and tattoos of life. He seemed to believe with all his heart that we were meant to be together. He believed that he was going to marry me and somehow save me. Well, I was looking for fun and no commitment. I wanted to be hurt and feel pain. I was in self-destruct mode, blaming myself for Faith's death. The just for thrill idea quickly went out the window. I fell fast and hard in love again in a new way I didn't know was possible. He knew everything about me and still wanted to stay. Even after knowing my childhood, my past, my current state of being mentally unstable, and having 2 daughters. I never thought I could keep him, so I secretly began to try and get pregnant. After 2 months together, he proposed. After 3 months, we were pregnant. At 6 months into our relationship, we were married. I had been completely wrong. My getting pregnant again really did help me heal after losing my daughter. Now, my 3rd pregnancy God used to save me from destruction. I was 24, and all was good until I fell at 5 months pregnant while giving a resident a shower. X-rays couldn't be done, so my back began to heal wrong. After delivering our son, I suffered a lot with chronic pain from the injury to my spine and SI joint. I did physical, water, and cryotherapy. I took epidural injections and steroid shots. Ultimately, the best relief came from narcotics. I became quickly addicted to pain pills. I made life work while taking in every stray person possible. I was a wife, a mom to 5 kids, and a protector of my dad, who was still an active user. Times got tough. Electric was shut off and we were out of propane. My husband struggled to find work. At this time, I completed my 7 years probation with drug-free success. Being in need of money, a friend offered to give us $50 a box for each box of Sudafed we bought. The profit seemed worth it. I was on a lot of meds for bipolar, anxiety, pain, PTSD, depression, and sleep disorder. So I didn't notice that it soon wasn't just my dad anymore who wasn't sleeping. By the time I did, it was too late. All the other adults in the house were doing meth again. To cope, I began to smoke pot again and over-medicate. Relapse number 6. January 9th of 2009, I woke to a deafening scream by my dad's girlfriend. Prepared to find him overdosed, I found him crying on the floor, staring blankly. My grandpa had just died. I lost it inside, terrified, as I thought for sure my dad would overdose now. I couldn't explain it in words then why or how much I had a mad love for my dad. Maybe because I felt like I raised him, needed to protect him, needed to feed him and make sure he sobered up once in a while. Regardless, he was my best friend. So the thought of losing him was crippling. It was this fear, along with my grandpa's death, on top of being tired of all the pressure of being the good one, that led me to have a pity party. I waited till the house was empty, and at age 26, just weeks off probation, I threw away 8 years sobriety. I tore my dad's room apart till I found meth and got high. Relapse number 7. After that, I began letting my girls stay with Travis's parents a lot, so we ended up evicted and homeless. We let the boys go live with their mother, only keeping our little boy since he was just a toddler. From January 2009 to July 2009, I went from sober homemaker to homeless and staying high. We financially survived by selling weed, meth, and pills. When we had our girls, I was terrible to them. Yelling, cussing, pulling their hair, and slapping them. Anything they did to interrupt us getting high, make an unnecessary noise, or upset others, got them abused and or locked in their room and out of ours.
On a regular basis, our son was locked out of our room with his sisters and the weed to entertain them, or random people keeping him occupied while we took turns getting high in our bedroom. Eventually, the girls rarely came home. We had completely lost contact and location of his two boys. I had become a parent like the ones I vowed to never be like. Worse even, because I knew what the damage could be. We didn't actually start IV using until May of '09, because from the first day of using, we totally agreed it would be a bad idea. I wanted to shoot up just one more time, so of course, we agreed to do it just once, and of course, that once was bogus. My husband thought he was in control, because still to that day, I had never used that way by myself. I always had someone else do it. There was no stopping for me. My husband quit after a month. He had no idea who this show was. He began attending church, he got saved, and tried inviting me once. Nope, not me. I was just getting started. This is where the darkness sets in. My worst and epic relapse number 8. I began to push him away. I told him lies like I didn't love him now and never did. Anything else I could think of to be away so I could stay high. I was relentless. He could have left, took my son, and never looked back. He stayed. And here's the clincher for me. He didn't just wait and watch. He chased me. All while I hated myself more. I didn't want his love. I didn't deserve the love of anyone. Mighty Michelle, sober queen, the rock, the anchor, looking down her nose with pity and disgust, had fallen. I buried myself into an inescapable pit. I was no longer anyone's rock. In fact, I was at rock bottom and ready to sink. One night, after 2 days of hiding and being lost in the woods for hours, he caught me, chased me into an alley, and grabbed me by my face. As I pleaded with him to just leave and let me go, let me die, he kissed me and said, "I love you. God loves you, and you're gonna live." It broke Satan's hold and I collapsed. He took me home, forced food on me, and got me sleeping pills. As he held me and watched me sleep, he held my hair as I got sick, watched me have sweats, woke me up from nightmares, and bathed me. After 3 days, he had me sober enough to see my kids one time before he put me in the hospital. Through Jesus, my husband did save me. I arrived at the hospital and I had over 28 track marks all over my body from attempting to get high myself. I had tried that many times to use, and supernaturally, something happened each time that wouldn't allow me to get high. My intake nurse just looked at me getting into my gown and said, "Oh my, you're lucky." Not lucky. I was blessed. I said, "I'm loved." Little did I know then how much God actually loved me. July 28th of 2009, I used meth for the last time. August 9th of 2009, I was delivered from pot, street pills, alcohol, and shoplifting, and pornography. January 2010, I quit smoking cigarettes. I was 28 years old and finally done with everything. I functioned normally with the assistance of all my prescription medications. While in the hospital, I went off all but one of my narcotic meds. The doctor placed me on an effective combination of meds that rectified the chemical imbalance I had suffered from for many years. PTSD, depression, anger, anxiety, and bipolar were under control. I went to church upon release. We relocated, completely changing all our people, places, and things. I got saved and baptized. We devoted all of our free time to church, changed to Christian music, trashed every scary movie and piece of pornography in our home. We got all of our kids back full time and began to raise them up in church. The years spent at my first church were fulfilling. We served in many areas, were greatly mentored, and had begun to mentor others. My family finally came to grips with the new me and started coming to church too. Then a shocker. The church split. We lost hope and heart. My faith was shaken. My kids were confused and my husband was angry. My family all fell away from church. Everything became questionable. Unknown to me, I had been worshiping people, not God. And when those people failed me, I was lost. I held on tight and stayed as long as I could, ultimately attending alone with a handful of people. Heartbroken, I submitted to what I thought was fear and walked away. I was lost, even though I had Jesus, because I had never been taught to have a relationship with him. I couldn't see yet, but I was being called out of that church.
I took a detour. It didn't take long to become worldly again. First, my prayer life diminished. Then my music changed, along with language and parenting style. I allowed secular TV, movies, and eventually porn back into my home. Relapse number 9. I knew better all the while. I wanted to stop, but I couldn't. Every bad behavior that resurfaced was met with tears by my youngest daughter. She begged, pleaded, and cried repeatedly, "Mommy, please be good again." It only made me angry. I began to entertain thoughts of a different, better life. Those thoughts paved the road to me having an emotional affair. Even though it was just texting, great damage was done. I was discovered and forgiven. Desperate for repair, my husband invited me on a trip. This would be my first time to Florida. My daughter bawled, saying, "Please don't go, Mom. I just know you're going to start smoking and drinking." She was right. On vacation, I went back to cigarettes and alcohol. Relapse number 10. Then devastation struck my house again. After discovering that my youngest son had been repeatedly molested for the past 4 years, I snapped. I remember truly wanting to kill his perpetrator. I went from loving this person to immediately hating him. It was no longer our boys. It became his boy and my boy. His oldest had molested our youngest. This is a very deep-cut subject considering my childhood. I ultimately left our home and was sick with grief for days. My hate grew beyond the perpetrator and poured onto my husband, pushing him far away. He was a piece of my husband, so I had to hate them both. I was desperate. I had moments when I would think, "Just pray, Michelle, you know it works." But I refused. I needed the pain. I needed the anger. Without it, what else did I have? I was helpless, so all I could do was feel vengeance, even if it wasn't vengeance occurring. Again, feelings of desperation. My daughter came to me lovingly expressing, "I need Jesus again." I sobbed, stating I don't even know where to start. I felt like I could never get back to the place I once was. I felt unworthy and ashamed. I wanted to be better, but I couldn't. She said, "Mommy, what helped change you last time?" I said music, because I can't even pray anymore. My life was out of control. I had unknowingly reached principle 1. Realize I'm not God. I admit that I am powerless to control my tendency to do the wrong things and that my life is unmanageable. And step 1. I admitted I was powerless over my addictions and compulsive behaviors, that my life had become unmanageable. For I know that good itself does not dwell in me. That is in my sinful nature. For I had the desire to do what is good, but I cannot carry it out. She said, "Okay, let's find something on YouTube." Said, "Sit down, Mom, and watch." This song forever changed my heart. "The Proof of Your Love" by For King and Country. Just as the darkness leaves his eyes in the music video, the darkness fled my heart. The chains began to break. As the music on the YouTube loop played daily, I began to worship out loud and in my heart. Every tear that fell was a piece of me surrendering to God. I knew I had to love that boy I once called a son again, even though I didn't know how and I didn't want to. I just longed to be close to God. An old friend annoyingly kept reaching out to extend some love, encouragement, and an invitation to celebrate recovery. I felt one day I'd be there, but continued to put CR off. I decided to visit First Christian Church, FCC. My first time was so uncomfortable. I couldn't stand myself. From guilt and grief, there was no way to control my sobbing. Great. I already felt awkward and now made a show of myself. My loving sisters from my old church came and escorted me upstairs and prayed for me. I came out of that room with a desire for fellowship and worship. My previous reasoning I called fear turned to a slight recognition that I may have been called to a different church, just maybe. I'm the one who drug my feet. My family needed a victory, so we set off for family vacation in Florida. I knew leaving out my life was about to change. I was very excited to see our worship team from the old church, but very nervous to have them see how much I had backslid. Nothing like conviction to sober a person up. I was delivered down there from alcohol and cigarettes again. I haven't drank since that July of 2015. My husband got fired up for God and began making plans to relocate to Florida. I was half in. God had other plans. As we returned to Missouri, my spirit grew tremendously in this new sobriety. My prayers became, "God, give me direction regarding relocation." I was ready to go, contingent upon my dad going with me. I believed in their mission and wanted to be a part of all they were doing. I had sobriety whipped and was ready to help others. As I lay in bed fantasizing about life with my fellow church family in Florida and dreaming of starting a Celebrate Recovery down there, I saw a vision from God. God had called me and several others out of my old church and into FCC to share God's love and acceptance with others. Little did I know that it wasn't all for others. I was about to relearn how to love, serve, and accept people while discovering who Jesus really was by worshiping Him and not people. I committed to stay and nurture this vision. Now I had to tell my husband. Time passed and I began to wrestle with God over the vision in fear of telling Him. Then, unexpectedly, a girl I had mentored who had been sober a while came by and told me she'd been attending CR. She said, "Come check it out." "Okay, God, I'll answer and attend CR tonight. After all, if I were to help addicts in Florida if we ever moved, I might want to see what it's all about." I had 16 people living with me at that time, so free childcare, meal, and a break sounded worth it. To my dismay, the lesson was on forgiveness. I tried to tune it out. Forgiveness had never been a strong suit of mine. I liked the way that bitterness tasted much more. I went to the women's addiction group believing that's where I was supposed to go. I shared a short bit leading with, "I don't struggle with addiction anymore, but..." Week 2 came, I soaked up the worship but felt like I wanted to leave. Then I realized it was a video testimony and thought, well, I'm already here. This video changed every part of my life. What in the world was codependency? I thought it was basically the same as addiction. Wrong. Reality set in. This couple described my personality, behavior, and mindset perfectly. I've had God moments. This was different. My eyes had never been this open. All the biblical knowledge I had and hours spent in prayer became a speck. I was ignorant. I was a baby. I needed to relearn everything with a new set of eyes that were fully opened. I was in denial. I wasn't a people-fixing hero. Codependency can be defined as an addiction to people, behaviors, or things. A codependent may act like vacuum cleaners gone wild, drawing to themselves not just another person, but also chemicals, alcohol or drugs, or things like money, food, sex, and work. I struggled relentlessly to fill the great emotional vacuum within me, doing all of those. I was greedy, manipulative, lied about money, ate my feelings, used drugs, stole, hoarded, found acceptance in sex. For me, it was trying to control my interior feelings by controlling people and things and events on the outside. Control, or lack of control, was central to every aspect of my life. I was addicted to another person, other people. I felt empty, ugly, unworthy, and guilty for my actions and the actions of others. I said yes to everything and everyone, knowing that I would be miserable. Moreover, I was a living definition of codependency. I walked the other direction to the codependent group. Apparently, I was the only one who could hear the video through the bad sound quality because as ladies began to share, they started with, "Well, I couldn't hear the video." Not me, thank God. I heard every single word. I had reached step in principle 2. What happened next was all in God's timing. I finally shared my vision with my husband, what had happened at CR. He accepted the relocation decision my heart had reached easily since his father had become very ill, and his sister was moving home from Florida. My father-in-law reached his deathbed the same day I got my first job since the fall of 2006. I had been a solid attendee at CR, and after recommitting my life to Christ, I eagerly plugged into FCC by this point, attending Bible study on Wednesday and joining the Sunday school class. My husband had been our sole provider until the loss of his dad. I gave up my homemaker role. I was determined to be codependent no more. I was invited to join the step study, and I accepted. I was eager to get to the why behind the what. I was in no position to help others. It was time to help myself. I committed to the new job and had my schedule made around step study, CR, Bible study, and church. The journey begins. The step study painfully opened my eyes more, and upon reaching principle and step 4, my life changed again. My second biggest revelation. The root what was clear. My what is codependency. Where it was literally born came to light. Why I protected and tried to fix people my entire life. Why I became addicted to people. Why I did my entire life what others wanted. Why I starved for all the wrong affection. Why I allowed inappropriate relationships. Why I stole to feel worth and happiness. Why I tried to control everyone and everything around me. Why I was everyone's doormat. The 6-year-old girl who watched Dad slit his throat, had instinctively began to protect and please people, fearful that people would leave and not love me. I recognized that my resentment towards my mom rooted back to her cheating on my dad. The what was codependency, but the why was the suicide attempt and cheating. The result is those two things were instrumental in shaping who I was and who I'd been my whole life. I sought approval in any way to avoid abandonment and cheated on every man I ever loved. I realized my dad, my best friend, my go-to, my biggest comfort and confidant, was actually the most unhealthy relationship in my entire life, and I was crushed. The level of codependency was crippling to us both. It had to change now. As the change did begin, I painfully began to detach and let go and let God. I was not going to hurt my dad or myself anymore by enabling him. My recovery had to be the most important recovery and sole focus now. I struggle still letting God have his life, along with others that I love in addiction. I learned how to say a very important word that we teach our children: no. I practiced it in small things and finally walked away from that house full of family and friends. My recovery, my Jesus, my husband, and my kids will be first. I began to eat better, recognizing I hadn't beat addiction yet because food was my lifelong stronghold and my go-to in all areas of emotions. I was an active food addict, but now I was done. I gave food to God and began to make changes, not because I didn't like what I saw or who I was, but the exact opposite. Finally, I loved and liked who I was. I was ready to conquer inventory. This was Principle 5, Step 6 and 7. Voluntarily submit to any and all changes God wants to make in my life and humbly ask him to remove my character defects. I have lost 70 pounds in the last 10 months. Finally, I had women I trusted and liked. Upon realizing I had been judging women unfairly, I allowed myself to begin my first ever healthy relationship with a female. She became my sponsor, and I now call her my best friend. Inventory dug up and then buried the past. It was painful, but also more rewarding than you can imagine. I graduated and continued to carry a blazing torch for Celebrate Recovery, asking God to bring me to the next level of closeness with him, while I bring the good news to others. Now I'm in my second step study doing inventory again, and God answered clearly. Unforgiveness is unacceptable if God is going to forgive me. I'm happy to say I have reached forgiveness for my oldest stepson, and I pray that he finds recovery. After all, I was one of the adults who failed him, and hurting people hurt people. Principle 6 and Steps 8 and 9. It was the healing and breakthrough I had longed for. I continued eating better, saying no, and I stopped being an enabler. Now I was ready for that next level of intimacy with God, so I prayed again. What must I do to follow you closer, Lord? God answered that prayer during the Not a Fan study. I was putting something else first as soon as I woke up: prescriptions. This brings me to the recovery I'm walking now. With much prayer and confession to my sponsor, I have recently decided to slowly go off all the medications I've been on for all these years. I'm 33 and was taking 9 different prescriptions with a total of 22 pills a day. I'm down to 5 prescriptions with a total of 7 pills now. Maybe one day I'll be medication free, maybe not. My pain is real, but God is greater. My chemical imbalance is real, but God is stronger. My mental health is real, but God is a healer. My doctor can't understand why, so I told her I want to start weaning off the scripts because I've been asking God to use me more, and this is the next part of my story he is calling me to. Well, doctor, God is able. This will be a careful process under doctor's direction, stepping down and off one medicine at a time. I do believe God gave doctors degrees for a reason. I'm going to pursue herbal supplements, and I'm not ignorant to the fact that I might not succeed. I am prepared to accept it if I have to go back on it, and I'm at peace knowing that I will have tried. Medication was not ever intended to be long-term in my case. In fact, every new medication was coupled with, let's try this for now. I no longer believe I'm only capable of being drug-free because of my medication. I'm drug-free because of God and the conviction he's coupled with common sense and morals. I monitor and record my actions by doing daily inventory. Principle 7, Steps 10 and 11. I dramatically changed all my people and places and things again, and have never once been near meth or any of its paraphernalia to have to say no. I truly thank God for that. I know what my codependent triggers are, along with signs of an emotional eating binge coming on. I use my sponsor and coping skills to work through it. My key for success in all of recovery is I have a relationship with Christ now instead of just believing in him. I have the support system of a church that's not just a building I sing and pray at. I have accountability partners and a sponsor, not just friends who let me whine and validate my every emotion. I have learned many coping skills and I'm ready for the change. I am ready to sacrifice and take up the cross. The definition of sobriety for codependency is difficult to define and may be different for everyone. For me, it required a basic change in the way I myself choose to engage with God and others. It involves a serious commitment to living in relationships differently than before, setting healthy boundaries that are uncompromisable. Instead of pursuing or avoiding relationships out of fear, I now pursue God and others out of a genuine desire to love them well. Christ-like love and codependency look similar. It is my motive behind serving others now that change from doing it out of a need of acceptance and fear of rejection into a desire to please and honor God while loving people because I want to, not because I feel obligated. I work the principles and steps while knowing my self-worth is who I am in Christ. I no longer try and rescue or fix. Chemical addiction sobriety for me is abstinence from all mind-altering substances aside from the use of legal prescriptions when not abused. I still struggle in many areas of life. I fail in my parenting by lack of fairness, not being consistent, but mostly by lack of discipline. I don't stay in touch enough and struggle nurturing relationships. Every day gets better. I anger easily and am sometimes negative, but I turn that to righteous anger or forgiveness and get better. I fight hard and often fail to balance all things celebrate recovery and church with family and marriage, but I'm getting better. Regarding acceptance, a wise person once told me, "What others think of you is none of your business." Excuse me, she was right. I still have codependent moments, but by taking the quick inventory and telling my sponsor, I can identify these times and begin to change my way of thinking regarding this specific situation. I forget to pray and often complain too much, but tomorrow will be better. I've withheld forgiveness for too long, but I'm getting better. I work towards getting better myself so that my kids aren't adults picking up the dysfunctional family pamphlet. All of this is why I celebrate my recovery. I desire recovery for every single person. I desire the peace of a relationship with Jesus for every single person. My favorite CR verses are very practical ones that I live by. James 5:16. Therefore confess your sins to one another and pray for each other so that you may be healed. This is applied during daily inventory and sponsor communication. Next is a verse I strive to walk in humility and celebrate my recovery humbly with. 1 Corinthians 10:12 says, "So if you think you are standing firm, be careful so that you don't fall." Practicing both of those will prevent relapse. I want to share the reason I love worshiping to the song Dry Bones with you. This entire story in Ezekiel 37:1-10 is the story of a place called the Valley of Dry Bones that God raised up, putting muscle, flesh, and skin on. Then he breathed the breath of God into the body and made it alive. It speaks to my life and what God can restore that was literally dead for a long time. To the newcomer, keep coming back. To the fearful, keep coming back. To the skeptic, keep coming back. To the regulars, never stop coming back. If you're an addict, I believe there is no lasting sobriety without recovery. And real true recovery, well, that can only happen through Jesus Christ. Celebrate recovery is for everyone. If you come thinking, I'm just here to support someone else, you can find healing too. To God be the glory and honor in all that I do. Codependent no more, relapse no more. I'm serving a life sentence with Christ in recovery, and I couldn't be happier. Thank you for letting me share.